Hello and welcome, everyone. So glad to see you here today. We have a phenomenal podcast happening today about stress and ways to cope with your stress. Of course, I'm Lori Shepard, the mental health coach coordinator here for AACC. Today, I have with me Phil, John Eklund, Dr. Greg Jantz. So I'll let you guys introduce yourself and we will get started.
Well, my name is Phil Smith. I am the director of the mental health coach program here at AACC and Light University. And John, what do you do in North Carolina?
I don't know. I'm stressed. I'm just stressed out.
You stressed?
Yeah, that's what I do. I get stressed out. So I'm excited about this podcast very much. My name is John Eklund. I am the founder of Recovery Live. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm also an ordained pastor, and super pumped to have Dr. Greg Jantz with us and to tell me how to deal with all my stress.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm Greg Jantz. This is my 39th year in the helping professions.
Wow.
I realize I don't look that old, but 39 years, and here we are. And I'm probably more passionate about, because of really what we've come through the last 3 years, I feel more passionate about helping, and I see that we have huge opportunity. Our country, let's just say it, is in a mental health crisis. And everybody's been traumatized in one way or the other. Just finished my 45th book. Oh, it's
Wow.
behind me back there. Triumph Over Trauma.
Triumph over
Gotta
trauma.
get a hold of that.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, one of the things is people were stressed out pre-pandemic. And as we've come through the never-ending pandemic, there's a new form of anxiety that's arisen. And anxiety, by the way, right now, if you go to your primary care physician, they have to ask you those questions on depression and anxiety because it's suicide prevention, because suicide rates are so high. But the number one diagnosis right now in our country is not a medical diagnosis. The number one diagnosis is an anxiety diagnosis. That's number one. Well, the new anxiety, the new stress. Okay, you wanted to know, what is the new stress out there? It really is anticipatory anxiety. It's a category of anxiety where I've been living in chronic stress. I've been living anxiously. And because every day in the media, if you watch it, there's a new stress.
Yeah.
There's a new unknown. There's a new bad thing every day. A new bad thing. It's almost as though it's just common. So people have developed anticipatory anxiety. They're just anticipating the next bad thing. That's how people are living. So stress levels, chronic stress, all-time high. In the early 80s, we started something called the whole person approach and believe that we need to, for long-term recovery. So we do mental health, we do medical, we do substance use. We really believe you've got to cover all the bases of how God designed us in the whole person. And we know that there's ramifications for chronic stress. Chronic stress creates inflammation in the body. Chronic stress, it could be the beginning of a disease process. So I say all that because people are stressed out.
Yeah. That anticipatory stress, is that kind of like waiting for the rug to get pulled out from underneath you again, and just kind of having that, like, just waiting for that next thing? I think that's a fascinating thought, because it is true. I think all of us are just kind of waiting for that next bad thing to happen.
Yeah.
And that does create stress on its own.
I seem to remember when being stressed out, was really cute. You'd say, "Oh, I'm stressed out. I'm stressed
Right.
out." Everybody kind of said it was sort of casual, and it's kind of turned from cute to this is getting serious. Like, this isn't cute anymore. This isn't funny to tell my coworkers or my friends that I'm stressed out, and just being a little bit on the hyperbole side of things. But now I agree. I think I see a lot of people who are genuinely trying to cope with it in their own quiet ways, without it, because it does feel like it's overused. I'm stressed out.
I know. It's kind of it's kind of been a chronic state that we have found ourselves in our country. I guess you could say maybe the world, but we're in a state of chronic stress, a state of chronic anticipatory anxiety. That's why the third highest diagnosis right now is addiction, anything related to addiction. This is why we find ourselves in an opiate and a fentanyl crisis. I was talking to our local sheriff. It's good to be friends with the sheriff, and he's a wonderful man. And I said, of the homeless in our county, he says 95% are fentanyl addictions.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And so that's what law enforcement is seeing. That's what we're seeing on the streets. So addiction rates have really skyrocketed.
That's sad. That's sad. And I can say that, talking about anticipatory stress, when COVID started, that's all you saw on the news. And so, but people were so addicted to watching the news to see what's happening. What are the numbers? Are they rising? Are they leveling out? Are they dropping? And everybody was addicted to seeing the news. And I think, do you feel that, of course, for me, I feel it made it 10 times worse because I was so addicted every morning to wake up with my coffee, watch the news. And after I watched the news, it was a state of, oh my goodness gracious. But we did it every single day.
Right.
Yes.
And use the word addicted. We get addicted to, here's a new one for you, to doom scrolling. We're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling on our mobile device, doom scrolling, because it's all bad news, but we got to keep having all that bad news. Here's the thing. People begin to question what they were hearing and reading, and they were beginning to question the media. So it got complicated because now we have a huge distrust factor that is out there, and people are feeling that we're being lied to, which adds to the stress. And I don't know what's true. I don't know what to believe. And so that adds to that anticipatory anxiety.
And that addiction piece, where a lot of the work that I do is with folks in recovery.
Yes.
The addiction piece is, obviously what we call coping. How do I manage this anxiety? I just want some relief. We're learning about marijuana. We're initially used marijuana to a lot of times to reduce that anxiety. I think we're learning over time, long-term studies saying marijuana actually contributes to anxiety. Wow. when you talk about long-term use.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested, what we talk about in recovery is if you're going to get rid of this one coping mechanism, which is drugs or alcohol. We know alcohol sales went through the roof during COVID.
300%
binge drinking went through the roof. Obviously the onset of, and by the way, fentanyl use at this point in time, we're seeing it used to be accidental.
Right.
Fentanyl. Today, we're seeing people actually going, I'm seeking out fentanyl because it's a better high. It's a greater high because of that progressive. I need more to deal with the stress in my life, the anxiety in my life. I need more and more of a high. So talking about, I'm going to get rid of this one thing, drugs, alcohol, being a workaholic, gambling, porn, whatever. You're going to help us find out what does it take to deal with stress in a healthy, what is healthy coping when it comes to dealing with stress? Because I think that's what people are asking is like, well, if I get rid of this one thing, I got nothing. I'm just going to, as Christian counselors, we hear a lot this scripture, do not worry. Jesus. Oh, that sounds great. Thank you. That's really helpful. Be anxious for nothing. Oh, thank you. I never thought of that before. How do we replace these coping mechanisms? What does it look like to cope in a healthy way with stress?
I think first of all, and boy, you've really summarized, John, some things that are going on. Alcohol consumption. We had 8 weeks in our country a year ago, 8 weeks where we sold $1 billion of alcohol, and that was beer. How do you sell? Now listen, that's just beer. How do you sell $1 billion every week for 8 weeks? That's people turning. It's those numbers, and that comes from the Alcoholic Beverage Association. So how about that? Well, and what we found is people were working from home and they started drinking while they were working, and we got technology people, which we have a lot out here, and they start drinking at 4 p.m. while they're working from home, and then it starts. I'm drinking at 1 p.m. and I'm writing computer code.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens is, in times of extreme stress, we turn to a way to self-medicate, and you summarized that so well. So what do? Well, we got to look in the mirror and tell ourselves the truth. Ultimately, it says, look, what I'm doing isn't working. In fact, it's making things work. And you got to have that little checkup from the neck up and really have an honest conversation with yourself, because that's the first step, getting out of the denial of what you're doing. And sometimes it takes a major crisis to bring us through that.
Sure.
I think, though, we can be very more proactive and say, look, man, the path I'm on, where will I be a year from now? What will happen to my health? What will happen to my relationships, my finances? So having that initial conversation, I say conversation in the mirror, but it's like, okay, I have to deal with the reality. I know, if I'm really honest with myself, I know what I'm doing is self-destructive. I know it is. I may not know what else to do, but I have to come into that moment of truth with myself. And then I need to tell somebody else. If it's get into a recovery group, but I've got to get support. If I've developed this pattern for a while, and a lot of people are kind of, they're, if you will, they're new addicts. They're new to addiction because it started during the pandemic, and they're still doing now what they did during the pandemic. They go, it's okay. I'll be back to work in a few weeks, but now you're still doing the same thing.
Right.
So first thing is we got to tell ourselves the truth, and then tell it to somebody else and get the support.
That's good. That's good. And denial is,
Yeah.
we talk about confronting denial and recovery. And the other night in our group, we were talking about, coping, and I was talking about wing walking. This old stunt thing that they do on these biplanes is that you go out on a wing of a biplane and everybody be watching you, and you'd be walking out on this wing, right? And they said the first rule of wing walking is, before you let go of one part of that wing, make sure that you have a grip on the next one, right? And so this idea is like, okay,
good idea. Yeah.
Because you don't want to be out there without anything to hold on to. Make sure that what you hold on to next is better than what you had.
Yeah.
And so this idea that, like, you're going to tell somebody, look, you gotta admit that you have a problem, and you got to start thinking about letting go of this thing that's helped you through the hardest time of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I got to believe there's something better to grab hold of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what is that?
Yeah, and telling the truth to another person, getting involved, because the next level is I begin to allow accountability in my life. We do something here, it's going to sound funny, but we do something called the Whiz Quiz, a urine and drug screen. And we do this on our clients. They're random. You don't know when your number is going to come up, and we're going to test you, if you're in our substance use program, to see if you're telling us the truth. Well, initially, most, they'll get out any story to get out of being tested at the beginning. But a few weeks into it, that accountability, something begins to happen, and a person's willing to be accountable and go, yeah, no, that's okay. Go ahead. You can test me. And that's a sign of growth. When we're willing to be accountable and we're willing to tell the truth, we're not afraid.
That's a great point. That's a great point. That is a great point. I remember a time in my life where it just felt like things were falling apart and crumbling. And when I would sit down to do my quiet time, I couldn't focus on it. All I wanted to think about was the situation at hand. And I was working out regularly at that point in my life. And I just decided what if I just went to the gym again? And then I got to where I was at the gym waiting for them to open up the gym. I got to know the opening staff. And then I would work out real hard. And then I would come back at 5 or 6 in the afternoon, and I'd work out again. And like John said, I felt like, okay, well, at least I'm not, doing the awful things, let's all the things that you could be doing. But and when you talk about looking at yourself in the mirror, I look at myself in the mirror like, all right, buddy, you know that there's a problem. But then the whole time I'm looking, I'm going, man, I am starting to look pretty good there. That is a pretty healthy looking muscle you're starting to develop.
Yeah.
I want a better view, Phil. Let's take a.
Oh,
Yeah. You're looking good, Phil. You're looking
I've
good.
overcome that addiction. I've
Fantastic.
overcome
You look
that
fantastic.
addiction. I'm here
Those
to
are the guns.
complete recovery for that. And but I remember the justification that it could be much worse, so it's okay to continue doing what I'm doing. And it's so hard, like you said, just to be honest, and then let somebody hold you accountable.
Yeah. Yeah, the willingness, and these are just some steps that we all need in different areas of our life. The willing to be accountable, the willing, and when I'm telling the truth, I'm not afraid. And then I start something called growth. I can start to grow. I can really begin to see and get a clear mind. One of the things addiction does is it robs us of a sound mind. I think of 2 Timothy 1:7 for, God came in power and love and to give us a sound mind. And I just simplified that really quick, but sound mind. Well, what gives you a sound mind? Well, addiction takes away from a sound mind. Too much chronic stress. I'm not thinking clearly, and God designed us with this prefrontal cortex where we make our good decisions, hopefully our wise decisions, this executive function. But when I'm in addiction and I'm overloaded with anxiety, I'm overloaded with stress, I tend to operate out of that primitive part of my brain back here that I'm more impulsive and I act out impulsively. So a sign of growth is I'm really moving more to this frontal lobe of processing my decisions prayerfully and being willing to be accountable versus the emotion, the more primitive part of my brain.
So Greg, go ahead.
Go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, let me ask you something. So for everybody listening today and talking about stress and people denying that they have a constant state of major stress, what would you say would be 2 or 3 signs to the typical person that they have too much stress and that they may not realize it? Well, are there 2 or 3 different things you can point out to let them be like, oh my goodness, that's
Absolutely.
what
First
I
of
have?
all, look at your sleep. I used to work in sleep research. Look at your sleep. Do I have insomnia? We're seeing if you try to get into a sleep disorder clinic or doctor right now, you're probably on a waiting list. We've never seen this level of sleep disorders. So am I having trouble not only just falling asleep, but am I waking up during the night? Am I waking up with gasping for air, in a sweat, my heart's racing? Am I having a panic attack in my sleep? So what's happening in my sleep cycles? How am I feeling when I get up? Do I have sleep apnea? Am I stopping breathing? All those things to look at. What's the quality of my sleep? The scriptures talk about a sweet sleep. We want to have a sweet sleep and get up renewed and refreshed. So we'll notice if you're under chronic stress, it does affect our sleep cycles. What are you putting in your mouth? If I'm stressed out, I just talked to a guy a couple of days ago. He goes, I think I'm averaging 12 to 13 cups of coffee a day. Do you think that's a problem?
Uh-oh.
Right. Okay. That was his way. Now, okay. Now
John.
I'm near the caffeine capital of the world, and you're required to drink at least 2 cups if you live here. But 12 cups is a little high. But what's
John,
going
did
in
you
your
crawl
mouth?
under the table?
Yeah.
You just keep the
And
data on that one.
In denial.
Yeah, big denial. Now, that means I'm probably, what's going in my mouth? Am I craving sweets? And how's my nutrition look? And those are, just how's my self-care? Those are signs that I may have too much chronic stress. The third and final one would be, am I avoiding people? Am I isolating? Am I pulling away more and more from people because it takes too much energy? I'm probably stressed out.
Yeah, I was going to mention isolation is such a cycle that people get into, right? It's one way of coping with stress, but it's also like one of the most disastrous things that we can do. And community is such a huge part of recovery and a huge part of getting better. The great fear I think, of folks coming out of isolation is that they're going to be judged for what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're going to, be called out, especially if you're a Christian and you're under stress. And that's the part that I was interested in some of your thoughts on this is, a Christian who is stressed out, who is worried. I think that it's hard for a Christian sometimes to admit that because they're worried, like that means I'm not being a very good Christian. But it's so vital to be able to admit it so that you can get help. And that's sometimes, I think, the cycle that people get into. How are you doing? I'm fine. Nothing. Hey, I got nothing to complain about. There's people have much worse than I do, but having that self-awareness and then the ability to ask for help, I think for believers sometimes, I think that can be difficult because they think, if I'm stressed out and I'm worried and I'm lacking faith. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that chronic stress does to us is it creates self-doubt. And I start to doubt myself. I start to doubt my value. And then I start to feel like I'm unloved. And as I feel unloved, I probably want to pull more and more away from people. And I may start to feel like God doesn't love me. There's no way God, because I feel so unlovable. And that's the lie. That's the lie of the stress, but the self-doubt. So the warning sign is, do I have a lot of self-doubt? Is it hard for me just to make simple decisions in my life? That's a big one. So that brings us to worry. And of course, Phil started us off with a scripture about worry. So worry is a mental process. Worry is all the what ifs. Well, what if this? What if that? What if they don't like me? What if I didn't wear the right thing? Whatever. But as I recycle my what ifs in the mental worry process, I can create anxiety. Yeah. My body starts to respond to that, and I begin to feel anxious. So one of the things that I want us to remember is developing a sound mind that's talked about in 2 Timothy is a process of doing different things as a part of caring for the whole person. There's a spiritual nurturing I need to do. There's a relational nurturing I need to do with the right people. There's a physical nurturing. I got to learn how to take care of myself again. Absolutely. And I've just seen, well, what if I start doing that more and more of that over the next 30 days? What would I feel like? In even my relationships. So just say the next month, I'm really going to take this idea of self-care and make it real.
That's awesome. And John, you just touched on, you were talking about how people as Christians may question, they're like, am I really a Christian because I'm stressed all the time? I'm worried all the time. And I think about in the mental health world, where stress, of course, it all correlates, but in the mental health world too, the same thing. Christians may have an issue and they feel, what are they constantly hearing? You need to pray more, you need to go to church more, you need to. But if they desperately need help, with a therapist or a counselor, that's extremely important as well.
Yeah, if 90 days, Lori, has passed and I'm having greater symptoms and I'm not functioning, I'm getting worse, that's a sign, hey, I need to be willing to ask for help. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we're able to do self-corrections. Other times we wait too long and we need somebody to kind of throw us a life preserver.
Mm-hmm.
It's always something, because I think we all do it when we're feeling the stress. We all feel, I think everyone thinks they can handle it. And they don't seek the help. They don't pay attention to their diet. They don't pay attention to their sleep. They all just seem to have a feeling of self capability. I'm fine, especially guys. I think guys are probably really prone to need to deal with this myself. And it's hard to ask for help, but God's word makes it very clear that that's what the Spirit is there, is to bring comfort. And he does want us to have that sound mind. He wants us to have that comfort. And I think so much of us we're just so self-capable, we think, that it's just not really worth stressing somebody else out over.
Yeah.
And from what I see a lot from people too, they're more concerned and worried about what others think. I'm not going to get help. I'm not going to ask for help because I'm too concerned about what do my friends think of me. If I can't handle
Mhm.
this, what does my family think of me? I can't let other people look at me that way. I think that's a huge issue as well.
That is, I'm glad, Lori, you mentioned that. I know what it's like to have chronic stress. I know what I had a major life crash. And I know what it's like. I was doing all the right and wrong things. I loved my work and I was passionate, and I allowed my schedule and my passion for helping people to ultimately bury me. And I know that this has been years ago, but I learned a great deal about what does it mean to keep yourself healthy. And I was in the depths of despair. I thought I chose the wrong career or calling, and my thinking wasn't clear. I could, I worked a lot in the past with eating disorders and binge eating, and I was the guy too that couldn't wait to get home to have my half gallon of ice cream too. You start doing what your others are doing, and that's what I found myself. And I had to totally redesign my life. And that's probably why I love talking about this, is I know firsthand. I know it probably took me, I look terrible, by the way. Somewhere we have an old picture of me, but I look terrible, a little embarrassing. And, it took a year, maybe more, just physically to feel better. And I had to, for me, exercise meant initially just going for walks, getting the movement going. And it was a slow rebuild because I was not practicing the things I was preaching. So I know what it's like to walk through this. I know what it's like to rebuild resiliency. And we all need to be alert to be our very best. And we're needed. We're needed as coaches. We're needed to speak a good word over others, but let's start with ourselves.
Yeah, I was thinking about this idea of hitting a wall in kind of high pressure situations, or having some kind of traumatic event happen in your life. But I think what you're describing is something a lot of maybe mental health coaches can fall into this category, where a lot of us who think that who know that we have a large capacity to handle responsibilities think we have a limitless capacity. And at some point in time, a lot of times if I'm talking to somebody, they go, man, it doesn't take much for me to have like a panic attack. It can be anything, it can be traffic. And how I describe it to him is like, if your life is just so full, like at capacity, it's like a water glass that's about to overflow. You just put an eyedropper of water and it's done. It's going to overflow because you don't have a limitless capacity. I wonder if part of the kind of building resiliency, part of what you're talking about, maybe as far as you restructuring your life, where do kind of boundaries come in place for you?
Yeah.
It's not just like doing new things, it's eliminating some of the things in your life that are putting you over capacity.
Just say no.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and you know what? We have to figure out in my case, what are time boundaries?
Yeah.
What are, I can't save the world and see clients 6 days a week and try to do paperwork on a Sunday. What are my time boundaries? And so the way I looked at it was I rebuilt time stewardship. God has given so much time in each day. How can I be the best steward of that? Care for myself so I can best care for others. So stewardship. And I think about it. Okay. In fact, my wife and I, we're having a conversation around this. It's what I have, our time, it's the time we have, and then the quality of our relationships. When we look around, I go, it really isn't the stuff. It really is the quality of our relationships. That's what we have. And so that really helped me.
I love that time stewardship, Phil. That's good. Right, Phil?
Good stuff. I saw you write that down, so I'm going to take that.
I like that.
I imagine. What are some things, Lori? What do you do? What are some of the things that you do, John? What are some of the things you do to help build resiliency? What do you guys do to build resiliency?
I drink lots of coffee and eat a lot of ice cream, and apparently those two things have been called out on today.
And Diet Coke.
Okay. Hey, We have a recovery group for both of you.
No,
I'm going to stay in denial on those things a little bit longer.
Something
Oh,
that refreshes me daily is in the middle of my workday, Phil, yes, and John, yes, in the middle of my workday, I will go outside and make myself walk for 25 to 30 minutes solid. Just get out, just take that second and be like, okay, this is my fresh air, this is sunshine. I'm reducing my stress, coming back fresh, energized, ready to go. I have found that when I don't do that, I will sit at my desk. I'll make myself sit here for 8, 9, 10 hours at a time. And then by the end of the day, I have nothing else to give to my family.
Yeah.
So if I get up, go outside, walk 25, 30 minutes, it makes everything perfectly fine.
Yeah, that's
That's
good.
what I do.
yeah.
That movement is so important because it helps also renew the brain. And we think differently when we're moving and walking. So good job, Lori.
Thank you.
I don't know if you guys are like me. I'm kind of one of these guys that wants to get things done. I like, and there's nothing more stressful to me than trying to remember everything I need to get done, because I know I'm going to forget something. And I have found that in the morning, if I get up plenty early, but man, about 4:30 every morning, it seems like, and I will write out my to-do list. Just start on your to-do list, just as you're drinking coffee and waking up. And then I can go in and, I don't have to worry about remembering, because I can remember, because I have 45 minutes of uninterrupted time that I can just write it down and not have to stress that I'm going to forget something. And I can come into work or my day. I can come into my day. I do that on Saturdays as well. These are the things I need to get done, and I'll feel accomplished, and I'll feel like, because there is nothing worse than the knowing you need to fix a squeaky hinge, and it's driving you. I'm going to fix that this Saturday, and then Saturday evening you're going to bed, you open up the door and it squeaks, and you just, I completely forgot about that. Really one important thing. So I have found that writing a list in the morning really does my soul a lot of good outside of my relationship with Christ.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So when I'm at ACC headquarters and I'm walking in and out of your office and squeaking that door, and you kind of cuss me out.
Driving me crazy. Absolutely.
Now I know you're
failure in my life. A failure in my life. The other day, one of the counselors walked by the office, and he stuck his head in, because he looked, he saw me. I had my trash can out, and I was digging through my trash can, going through probably 100 Post-it notes, because I had written something down. Are you okay in there? I'm okay. I wrote it down. I just got to find out what I wrote down, and so
I worry about you a little bit.
Yeah. My wife used to live like you, Phil, by Post-it notes. I don't think we ever showed you her office. But how do you do this? There's Post-it notes everywhere. And I love, by the way, if you you got to ink it if you think it. So is my saying. So years ago, my wife got me this little Einstein pad, and it has a pad. I got oodles of these pads, and then what I discovered is that's way too small, because if you think of something during the day you need to do, write it down. Now I'm like you, Phil. I graduated from Post-it notes to the little notepad. Now I have to carry this around.
Yes.
So the list grew.
Yes. I have 2 or 3 of those pads at one point. I know what you mean.
But we still have these too.
Oh, I think you can see the Post-its over my quarter, over the in the back there. So
Yeah,
there you
It
go.
is. Time stewardship.
Love it.
absolutely.
Fantastic.
Just a huge stress reducer in my life, and does me a world of good in resilience, I think.
Yes.
So, well, so is there any last word, Dr. Jantz or John or Lori, you want to share about resilience? I want to kind of wrap it up, but I'd love to be able to, let people walk out the door with maybe a tool other than a Post-it note trip. Don't not encourage you to prescribe yourself Post-it notes, but is there something you would encourage people to do when it's helping other people with stress or building resilience in their own life?
Well, one quick thought would be I need to also manage my personal emotions. How am I doing with the 3 deadly emotions? Anger, in other words, for anger could be hurt, rage, bitterness, resentment. So first heading is anger. How am I managing my own anger or hurt? Number 2 is how am I handling fear in my life? Worry, fear, anxiety. Where's that level? And the third one would be guilt or shame. Where's the level of shame in my life? Do I feel defective? Do I feel like I'm not good enough? But managing as you go into situations, part of resiliency is I have to be healthy emotionally versus toxic emotionally. So just do a little checkup on anger, fear, and guilt.
Good.
That's awesome.
That is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, I want to say thank you, Dr. Jantz, and to Lori and John for being a part of the podcast this morning and sharing with us all your insights. And Dr. Jantz, I can't wait to us to cross paths again. John, I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good, Phil.
Yeah.
This is called Coffee Cup Counseling, by the way. So
Okay. And since that's just his 10th cup, he's okay.
yeah,
Absolutely.
okay. I'll cut myself off. I can quit whenever I want. Okay.
Oh, here we go. Well, guys, listen, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to make this happen. I am so excited for the whole subject and just to be able to take time and reflect on the notes that John took. And we are just going to be pushing forward again. Thank you so much for joining us on our Coffee Cup Counseling podcast today, and we appreciate you being with us today.